Proverbs chapter 5, verse 21, the ropes of sin. Look with me, if you will, in verse 21 of chapter 5 in the book of Proverbs. For the ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he, God, pondereth all his goings, all of man's goings. Look at it again. For the ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he pondereth all his goings. Now, in a simple idea, the Bible is teaching us that God knows everything about you. God knows everything you do. God knows everything you think. God knows everything you say. He knows every place you go. God knows the things that you want him to know about, but he also knows the things you don't want him to know about. God knows the things that you think no one else knows about. Because my Bible tells me here that the ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he pondereth all his goings. Or God knows everything you're doing, even the motive behind what you are doing. Sometimes your friends, maybe family members, loved ones, will see you do something and they'll scratch their head and wonder what in the world ever possessed him to do that. Or why in the world did she do something stupid like that? My Bible tells me that God doesn't have to scratch his head. He knows exactly why you did it. He knows even your secret thoughts. He knows your secret desires. There's nothing about any of us that God doesn't know. He knows it all. As a matter of fact, hey, God already knows right now what you're going to do next week. God knows where you're going to be next year. And some of you may not be around. Some of you may be dead. The ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord. He knows everything about you. Another verse in the Bible tells us that the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, beholding the evil and the good. God sees the good things you do, but he also sees the wicked things you do. When you think you're getting away with sin, the Bible says you're not getting away with it at all. God's watching. He knows what you're doing. Now look with me, if you will, at verse 22. God goes on to tell us, in verse 22, he says, his own iniquities, meaning the individual person's own particular individual sins, lawless rebellions against the Word of God. His own iniquity shall take the wicked himself. Some people have the mistaken idea that God deliberately tries to get people to sin. My Bible tells me that God does not tempt any man with sin. God himself cannot be tempted with sin. And God doesn't use sin to tempt or test anyone. But a man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust. Every last one of us have an old sinful nature that we were born with, and because of that old wicked sinful nature, because of an old wicked sinful flesh, we don't need any help to do things wrong. Nobody ever gets up in the morning and saying, well, I'm going to have to really work hard to try to do something bad today. Now, I know it's going to be difficult, but I'm going to work hard at it. Now, I'm going to practice. I'm going to practice trying to tell a lie. And I'm going to practice trying to steal. And I'm going to practice trying to be dishonest. I'm going to practice trying to be ugly. I'm going to walk around with my tongue hanging out all day and just point it at everybody, you know. And I'm going to do my best to be as rotten as I can. No, you don't have to work at it. The fact of the matter is, you were born that way. Hey, nobody has to ever teach you how to lie. Because the Bible says, and they be born from the womb speaking lies. Do you know what? Nobody had to teach you how to tell a lie. Why do young people lie? Why do adults lie? Because somebody said, now look, here's what a lie is. Now I want you to practice it. I didn't do it. And shake your head like that, see. That's where you start, see. Did you do something? No. Even before you could before you could speak, before you had the ability to say, I didn't do it, you said it just by shaking your head. Nobody had to teach you how to tell a lie. It just came naturally. Nobody had to teach you how to throw a temper tantrum, to lose your temper. It just comes naturally. Hey, fact. My Bible tells me that you were born with an old sinful nature. And my Bible says that you are going to be destroyed by your own wickedness. Look again at verse 22. His own iniquities shall take the wicked himself. God does not try to get you to do things wrong. God tries to keep you from doing things wrong. God tries to get you to do what's right. When there's that battle going on inside you and something pulls you towards sin and tries to get you to do something wrong, a little voice whispers and a desire wells up in your heart to do something wrong, there's also another one that either whispers inside, don't do it, or there is an outside influence that says, no, that's wrong. Then you put it down. The one that says, no, that's wrong, don't do it, that's God. Either working through your conscience or by the Holy Spirit himself telling you, don't do it, it's wrong. Hey, God doesn't want you to sin. God doesn't want you to be hurt by sin, much less destroyed by it. But if you keep playing with it, you will be destroyed by it. Because the Bible tells us his own iniquities shall take the wicked himself. Verse 22, look at the last phrase and underline it. That's what I want you to see this morning. And he, the wicked person, shall be holden with the cords of his sins. Underline that phrase. And he shall be holden with the cords of his sins. Now the word cords there is the idea of strong ropes. Strong ropes. And this morning I'm talking to you about the ropes of sin. Young people don't know it. And sad to say, most adults don't know it. But they are being tied up by the ropes of sin. And most of them haven't got the foggiest idea of what's taking place. You say, what do you mean? The ropes of sin will hold a person, just keep them from doing certain things. Is that the idea? So they can only go so far in their life? Is that what the ropes are for? No. Verse 23 tells us, he shall die without instruction, and in the greatness of his folly he shall go astray. Do you know what the purpose of the ropes of sin are? The purpose of Satan's ropes of sin is so he can kill you, so he can destroy you. That's what he wants to do. And if he can't destroy you, he'll settle for second best. He'll ruin you. He'll make a mess of your life. And in the greatness of his folly, he shall go astray. If he can't kill you, he'll settle for crippling you. He'll settle for ruining your life. He'll settle for messing you up so that nobody will ever want to have anything to do with you. He'll settle for messing you up so that you'll never be able to achieve your heart's desire. You'll never be able to have a life like you ought to have. I remember years ago in Knoxville, Tennessee, meeting a young boy, 18 years of age, by the name of Bucky. I haven't even thought of Bucky. I don't guess I've thought about Bucky in 10, 15 years. But Bucky, as I talked with him, was laying in a hospital bed in Knoxville, Tennessee. He was 18 years old, and he had been in that hospital bed for over 2 years. That same one. Bucky, as a teenager had decided that he was going to have his fun, that he wasn't about to have anything to do with religion. Nobody could tell him what to do. He was smarter than everybody else. And Bucky was going to live life to the fullest. He was an athlete and a star athlete. He was one of those kind of guys that everybody talked about. He was handsome and good looking. And there just wasn't anything that Bucky wouldn't try. And he played with sin, and played with sin. God tried to get him saved and tried to get him to leave sin alone, warn him about it again and again and again, and he just kept getting deeper into sin. And one day Bucky went with several of his buddies, and they went swimming in the Smoky Mountains. And they went swimming in an area where there was a waterfall. And because of a waterfall there in the mountain stream, it was naturally real deep for about 30 to 40 yards around that waterfall. And these guys were climbing the waterfall and jumping off and diving off and having the biggest time of their lives. They were just having a big time. A lot of fun. And Bucky told one of the guys, he said, "Watch this." He said, I'm going to dive from the top of the falls. Now, the top of the falls really wasn't that high. It wasn't more than maybe 25, 30 feet. That'd be about like diving from the top of this building. And old Bucky, he said, "Ain't nobody going to forget this dive." He said, "Everybody else is a coward." He said, "I ain't afraid." And he was a good diver. Bucky climbed to the top of that waterfall, and he screamed and hollered and waved his arms for everybody to see. Wanted everybody's attention. And boy, he got it. And they watched. And finally, Bucky took one last deep breath, and over he went. Beautiful dive. He came down in a swan dive type thing, arms stretched out wide, and his nose just kept bending a little closer down towards that water, and his feet began to go up. It was a beautiful dive. And boy, he hit that water, and he cut that water and went down straight into it, and I mean, it was almost perfect. And the guys screamed and hollered, and they were glad and tickled, and boy, they could hardly wait for Bucky to get out of the water so they could pat him on the back. But he didn't come up. And they thought, that's Bucky. He not only makes the biggest dive in the world, but now he's going to sneak up on us. And so they figured that when he dove under the water, was swimming off to come up a different side or something. And so they was all running around on the rocks looking over the ledges and trying to say, "Keep your eyes open, he's coming. He's going to come up over here." And no, he'll be over here. What? I think I see something. But they didn't see anything. And then suddenly they realized something was wrong. Bucky wasn't coming up. And they hollered. And one after the other, they dove into the water from the short ledges. And they began to swim around in that crystal clear, mountain cold, ice cold water. And they found him. Bucky was floating unconscious about 12 feet under the water. The pool itself had to be, in some places, had to be 20, 25, 30 feet deep. But as they swam around, when they found Bucky, they also found something that they did not know was there. Because right below where Bucky had made that beautiful dive into the water, there was a tower of rocks that stuck up until it was about 10 feet from the surface of the water. But they had never seen it. And they'd never had any problem with it because nobody had ever made a dive from that high and gone that deep. But Bucky made his dive and he hit that thing head first. They pulled him out. He was alive. When I saw him 2 years later, he was just as alive that day as he was when they pulled him out. He had not changed, not 1 inch. He was alive, if you can call it being alive, because you see, Bucky was paralyzed from his neck down. He couldn't move. His athletic days were over. His days of running after sin were finished. Bucky, the only way that he could do anything, draw pictures or write words, whatever, was with a pencil stuck in his mouth, clenched with his teeth, and a pad that's propped up on a form in front of him. He cannot move 1 muscle below his neck. Anytime anybody moves him and picks him up, a well-meaning nurse almost killed him one day. He has no muscles. They're there, but they don't work throughout his entire body. And his stomach and his intestines, if anybody ever turns him over, they want to roll out of his skin. It's almost like his skin almost reacts like a huge balloon filled with water that's being rolled across the floor. It stretches as the inside wants out because there are no muscles to hold things in place. They don't work. And a nurse helping him into a wheelchair one day to give him an opportunity to sit outside for a while, which was not an uncommon thing. But she forgot to put on a special leather girdle. It's a large, it looks like a giant belt. It's about that wide, straps just below his intestines and comes all the way up to his chest, and then it buckles like a huge belt in 3 places. And the whole idea of that thing was you tighten it up, buckle it and tighten it tight, so that when you pick him up, his stomach and his intestines will not try to force their way out of his stomach walls, out of his skin. But she forgot to put it on. She picked him up, and he could not even feel, but his eyes rolled back in his head as his skin almost burst. You say, what happened to Bucky? He's still there. He got saved. He got saved the week after he got paralyzed. But young people, he paid a horrible price for his sin. No, hey, the devil had him wrapped up with the ropes of sin, almost killed him. But though he didn't kill him, Satan was willing to settle for just ruining him for the rest of his life. I could tell you one story after another like that. And the hard thing is that your pastor, your teachers, your principal, your leaders, and even your friends one day very probably are going to tell stories about some of you. May not be a story about being paralyzed, but it'll be a story about being ruined by sin. Just simply because most young people think they know more than God does. They think they can play with sin and get away with it. And you can't do it. You say, preacher, what do you mean, being roped by sin? All right, here it is. As I said, I love horses. And I learned how to break horses with the help of Dr. Bill Rice. Now, at the Bill Rice Ranch, we had what we called a breaking corral. Now, breaking corral was an area, well, let's see, it was about maybe twice the size of this platform. It wasn't real big. You don't need something real big to break a horse in. But in the corral area, there was a post called the snubbing post. And that snubbing post is your best friend when you're breaking a horse. Now, just to be honest, hey, if you ever want to learn how to break horses, you'll find out quick that you don't do it like you see on television, you know, where some cowboy comes out with spurs on his boots, you know, and he's got his big old 10-gallon hat on, you know, and he comes out there with a serious look on his face, you know, and there's 4 guys out there with a horse, and one on each side holding the saddle in place, and the other 2 down at his head, you know, and holding on to the rope that is wrapped around his mouth and his head, you know, and the rest of the rope becoming the rein and laid up over the saddle horn, and the horse has got a blindfold on him, you know, and they're holding him steady there, and this guy runs out there and he sticks his left foot in the stirrup and swings up, and brother, the horse explodes, and wham! Man, he just goes bouncing all over the place, you know, and jumping up, and everybody's waving their hats and say, "Woo! Ride him, you know." Now, that ain't the way to break horses. You do that, you get your neck broke. I guarantee you, that horse will kill you. That's the worst way in the world to break a horse. The way to break horses is get them when they're so little that they can't fight back, that they can't do enough to bother you. Now, I didn't have a whole lot of trouble because I'm 6 foot 5 inches tall. And I like to break the little ones because, see, I could get on the back of a little horse. You get them when they're a yearling, about a year old, just little things, little colts. They look like little colts, even yet. And you get them when they're real small, and that way, my being tall as I am, I could get on the back of a horse and my feet would only be about that far from the ground, you know. I just hang my legs over the side, you know, and I didn't use stirrups or anything. You know, I'd sit in the saddle. But I didn't have to use stirrups. And I just had my feet just hanging down about a foot from the ground. And that way, if the little colt decided to get real ferocious and really going to buck me off, you know, he'd give it everything he's got. Most of the time, when he'd buck, it would be just kind of like riding in a car and hitting a sudden little dip in the road, you know, a little drop in the road. And it'd be you'd go along and say, "Ooh," you know, and that's about all there was to it, you know, nothing serious. And if you ever did get real excited and stumble and start to fall, there was no problem because I just stick my foot down on the ground, step off, and just let him fall on the ground. And after he lays there, just say, "What are you doing down there?" You know, and it's no big deal. So the best way to break a horse is get them when they're little, and break them when you can handle them. They're easy to break then. But every once in a while at the ranch, we'd get a horse that was either given to us that had never been broken, full-grown horse, or we'd overlook a colt in the over 1,500 acres of land that we had altogether. From the front of the ranch to the back of the Bill Rice Ranch, it's 5 miles one way. And you can lose a lot of horses in that much territory, especially when it's covered with the foothills of the Cumberland Mountains. A lot of trees, some areas so thick with underbrush and trees that you can't walk through it, much less ride a horse through it. It's worse than the jungle in some areas. And so once in a while we would find a little colt that had gotten away and grown up, didn't need its mother anymore, had gotten away, just wandered off grazing, and somehow or another worked herself into an area where the horses weren't supposed to be, didn't normally go, and would get overlooked, and then after a while, they learned to hide from you so that you can't find them. And I remember that we found a horse one time back in the back, fully grown. It's 3 years old, And we remembered it as a colt, but we'd lost it and couldn't find it. And it literally took us 2.5 years to find the silly thing. And we found him. And brother, he was not only full grown, but he was mean as a snake. And so we herded him up to the stable area from the back part of the ranch. Got him up there and put him in the corrals and began to feed him, grain him, try to be around him, just talk to him some. Then came the day to break him. And here's the way you break him. You put him in the breaking corral. There's only one gate that leads into that corral. You get him in, and then you close it and make sure it's locked good. And then the cowboy that's going to do the breaking gets him a rope, a lariat, about 25, 26 feet long. Now you have to get a rope that long in order to do the thing right. Because you don't want to get too close to the horse, because a horse that has never been broken, full grown, is spooky, and he'll do anything. He's scared to death of people. And especially when you put it in an area where there ain't nowhere to get out, and it's horse against man, I'll guarantee you he can kill you unless you know what you're doing. And so here's what we do. As I said, in the corral area, there's a snubbing post. Now the snubbing post was not in the middle of the corral. You say, what do you mean snubbing post? All right, snubbing post is a post that looks like a telephone pole that's been cut off about 8 feet above the ground. Now, that's all it is. You say, just a short post like that. Yeah, but 8 feet, that's pretty tall. But see, then you've got about 5 or 6 feet of telephone pole in the ground. Now, the whole idea is that you want to rope that horse, and then you're going to put that rope around the snubbing post to get the horse pulling against the post instead of you. Because if you rope a horse that's never been broken, and if he could get out, he'd drag you all over the pasture unless you had enough sense to let go. He could even kill you. And even in a corral situation, he could drag you all over that thing, cause you to stumble and fall, and even trample you. And so you need a friend, but you need a strong friend. Now this post, this telephone pole that sticks about 8 feet above the ground, is not just stuck down in a hole, because a horse is so strong that if all you did was dig a hole and drop that thing in there and put the dirt back around it, and you tie that horse up to that snubbing post with a rope around his neck, that horse will literally pull that post out of the ground. He's that strong. He can work it out. It'll take him a while to do it, but he'll do it. So what you have to do is, when you put the snubbing post in the ground, you dig you a big hole about 5 feet square, and you stick that post down in the middle of that hole and then fill it with concrete, and then leave it about 4, 5, 6 inches from the top of the ground. And once the concrete hardens, then you can put dirt back over on the top of that concrete, and you never know the concrete's there, but it's there. And that way, when you put that rope around the snubbing post, and that horse is going to try to drag that post down to the other end of the corral, he's going to be in for a surprise, because that post ain't going nowhere, not buried in 5 feet of concrete. All right. Now, you don't put the snubbing post in the middle of the corral. You put it about 8 to 10 feet away from the end of the corral, near the fence, about 8 or 10 feet away from that fence on one end of the corral. Why? Because the whole idea is you're going to run that horse, once you get the rope on him, you're going to run that horse down the side of the fence, deliberately make him run down there, and he's looking for a way to get out. And what he'll do, he'll go down to the corner, and he'll make a right turn and head for the next corner, trying to find a gate, trying to find an opening, trying to find a way to get out. And when he does, that rope around his neck in your hand will hit that snubbing post, and then you can quickly put that rope around the post, and you've got him. He's tied up. That way, see, you don't have to try to pull the horse to the rope. You let the horse run down towards the post. pull that horse to the post, rather. You let the horse run down to the post and run around on the other side of it, and the rope will automatically go around it. All right. But you got to get the horse roped first. And I don't know if you ever tried to rope a wild horse or not, but it's not the easiest thing in the world. But you take your lariat, 26 feet long, and the first thing you do is you tie you a big knot in the end of it. Now you've already got your noose on the thing. It's all already fixed up. But now on the other end, the tail end of the rope, you tie your big knot in it. Why? Well, that's so that whenever you take the rest of the rope and you make big loops in it, and you get it all in your hand here, and leave the noose down on this end for this end, you put that knot inside your hand and you stick it so that the knot, like my fist, do it this way or you can do it that way. But you make sure that that knot is in your hand. Now, I prefer to do it like this, so that when the rope starts to run, when the horse pulls on it and the rope starts to slip through my hand, what will happen is it'll slip up and that knot will be caught by my thumb and finger. And that way I've got control of the rope. I don't lose the rope. If you lose the rope, you can lose the horse. See? And you're liable to have a rough time trying to pick up the tail end of that rope if it's run around the ground. So you want to make sure you don't lose it. So you got a knot in it. All right. Here we go. Now then, you're all ready to go. What you do, you stand in the middle of the corral, and you make sure the horse stays down on this end. Snubbing post is down here. All right, you got him down on this end. And the way you make sure that he stays down there is if he tries to run down one side, in the middle, you just run over real quick to this side, and you can take your rope in your hand. You can either raise this hand, you can raise that hand, or if you want to take your hat off and wave at it, whatever you do, it doesn't matter. No big deal about it. It's your choice on that. No particular rule. But what you do, you run over and you say, hey, get on back down there. And you keep him down on that end. See, that's the idea. All right. Now then, once you get him down there, he'll always head for a corner, because that's usually where the gates are. A gate is normally located in a corner. And so the horse is looking for the gate, looking for an opening to get out. And so what you do, you run the horse deliberately. You're not ready to rope him yet. You got your big noose, and the noose, you hold your hand out like this, and the noose reaches all the way to the ground. There's not any knots in it. You've already got all the twist out of the rope and everything. You got the knot on the end of the rope, and everything's fine. You're ready to go. And what you do, you run over here, and you spook the horse. You make the horse run to that corner. And so you get over here and you holler, get on over there. He runs down that way. Then what do? Well, he goes over in that corner, and then you run over here on this side, still staying about the middle of the corral. And you run over here on this side, and you holler, all right, now go the other way. Woo! Woo! And boy, he'll turn, and he'll go that way. Now, you do that several times. Now, the reason you do it is because you're trying to learn what that horse is going to do every time it turns to go to the other corner. Does the horse turn towards you and swing around and go to the corner, or does he turn away from you and swing around and run to the corner? When he gets down to this corner, how does he turn around? Does he turn around this way, swing his head towards you, or does he swing his head away from you and head to the other corner? You got to do that several times so that you'll know for sure exactly how that horse is going to turn. Now, the reason is you're trying to figure out where you're going to rope that horse. You say, well, you're going to rope him around the neck. Yes, I know, but the horse ain't going to help you. He's not going to walk up and say, no, look, here, hold it open. I'll stick my head in there, and we'll get everything all right. He's not going to do that. So what you got to do, you watch to see how the horse turns his head. And you force him to turn. You holler at him. Make him turn. Don't let him stand in the corner. As soon as he gets down there, run him back to the next one. Run him from there, back to that one again. And you do this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, the whole time watching. And then you decide, okay, is it easier to rope the horse from this corner when he turns his head this way, or is it easier to rope the horse in this corner when he turns and swings his head back that way and runs along the fence? Now, for me, it's easier for me to rope him from this corner because I'm right-handed, and that's the easiest way in the world for me to throw it. So here's what I'm going to do. I finally get him timed. All right, I know it takes him about a second and a half to wheel around and head for that other side. All right, I get him down here in this corner, I holler at him, woo, whoa, get on down there. And boy, he'll come a-running down there, just kicking up the dirt. And he'll hit to that corner. And as soon as he gets there, I'll holler, throw this hand up with a rope, and I'm waving him. Man, I'm ready. I've been doing this. I'm ready to go this time. Time has come. And so I'll holler and wave this hand up in there, and I'll holler, woo! woo, move again. And boy, just as soon as he starts to turn, I have already figured that my rope is going to take approximately a second to just a little over a second to reach that horse. And so I got to figure I want to throw that rope where that horse's nose is going to be 1 second after he turns. You don't throw it at the horse's head. You'll miss him. By the time the rope gets there, he'll be gone. So you throw it where he's going to run, where his nose is going to be in a second or two. And I figure that thing out, and I throw it and make a big toss, and that noose opens up into a big wide circle, and sure enough, he'll turn, and before he realizes it, he'll run straight into that noose. And as soon as it's there, I give it one big jerk, and man, it tightens up that fast right behind his head, around his neck. You say, you got him. No, he's got me. There's a big difference. If he was a little horse, I'd have him. But when they're big and full grown, they've got you. You don't know it, but you have just foolishly roped a keg of dynamite. Because as soon as that rope goes around that horse's neck and you jerk it and it tightens up around his neck, he don't like it. And suddenly, he'll skid to a stop, he'll rear up, he'll paw the air, he'll snort, his nostrils of his nose will flare and back and forth like this, open up, and his eyes get wide, and his ears sometimes will lay back. I mean, he's mad as a hornet. He's ready to kill. He don't like that rope around his neck. And brother, he'll pull and he'll try to get away from you, and he may charge you, and what you got to do, you got to spook him, you take your hat off, and wave and say, "Oh, get away from here, woo, whoa, no, come this way, And you run over here close to the fence, and you run it. Now, what I got to do, you got to move quick, because brother, you don't want to fight with this guy. He'll wear you out quick. He'll ruin you. And so what you do, you run over to this side real quick, got a hold of the end of the rope, keeping it taut, keeping it tight, and you wave your hand or hat or whatever, and you run him down that fence. Boy, you're waving and hollering, here he goes, man, and you running down the side of the fence over here on this side. And you're running down there and keeping that rope tight, that horse is running, trying to get away from you, looking for a way to get out. Okay, everything's going fine. Now then, he gets down to that corner, and you holler, woo! Keep going. You move towards the end of the middle of the crowd now, and you're keeping the rope there. And then he cuts, and he makes his turn and heads for the far corner. But this time, things are different, because you got a friend down at the other end of this corral called the snubbing post. And as soon as he runs past, he runs on the far side of that snubbing post. And as soon as he does, just like if you were to hold your arm out and somebody walked into it, your elbow would kind of bend like that and go right. Same way with that rope. As soon as that horse runs past that snubbing post, I got the rope right out here holding on the end of it out in the middle of the crowd. As soon as that horse runs past that snubbing post, that rope hits that post, that big old telephone pole buried in 5 feet of concrete. And as soon as it does, brother, I start running for the horse. You say, you going to run towards him? No, not really, but I got to keep the rope tight. And it looks like I'm going to run towards him for a minute, but I'm not going to run towards him. What I'm doing, I start running towards the horse, and I'm taking up some of the slack of the rope as I do, and what I'm doing is I'm running for the end of the corral, because I'm going to run under that rope, hopefully. Because, brother, you got to do everything quick. And whenever that horse hits that corner, he's coming up this side. And so is that rope sticking out from that post. I got the other end of that rope. And so when he hits that corner, Brandon, I make a beeline for that end of the corral. And the rope, with the slack taken up, brother, it's tight, and I'll run towards that end of the corral, and as soon as the horse goes this way, I'm going that way, and as soon as that rope gets near, I duck down real quick, boy, just like that, and boy, you got to do it quick, and you got to get low. Because you can get yourself hung that way. It's like playing in the backyard and running into the clothesline. You're in trouble if you don't duck fast enough. And so you duck under that rope real quick, and the horse runs by, and you run around that post. And what you do, all you do is just run around that post, and suddenly that rope will overlap itself, and when it does, it makes a knot. The rope stops slipping. Because the horse pulling on the rope has literally caused the rope to become a knot. There's no knot there. It's just that it is tightened up on it, and now the rope is just like it's been tied around that post. And suddenly that horse, instead of running down to the other end of the crowd, he finds out he ain't going nowhere. And he runs around and he starts running down the end of the crowd, and something pulling on his neck, and he ends up running about towards the middle of the crowd. You say, what do you do then? All I want to do is just keep that horse near that snubbing post. Keep him quiet. I don't let him keep wrapping the rope around. You don't want to do that. You don't want to wrap it around once. But you keep the rope tight. I just back away, and I'm holding on to the end of the rope, and that horse, man, he's jerking and swinging his neck, and rearing up and screaming and snorting and hollering, and I'm standing there enjoying it because I don't feel a thing. The post is getting all the work. It's getting everything done to it. Hey, you say, then what do you do? All right. What happens is that rope tightens up around the horse's neck and cuts off his air. The more he pulls, the more it hurts. And the tighter it becomes, the less air he gets. And so after a minute, he kind of calms down, just stands there and pulls against it, kind of doing like this type thing. And then after a minute, you see his eyes start to bug, They start to bulge a little bit. And you realized, he needs to get some air. And so I get ready. And so finally the horse moves towards the post and the rope sags a little bit. And when it sags, it loosens up around the post and starts to slip down it a little bit. And that's what I've been waiting for. Because he'll take 2 or 3 steps to loosen it up so we can breathe. And as soon as he does, I step back and give that rope a jerk, and it slips around the post, and it takes up that slack. And I've now got that horse 3 feet closer to the post than he was a while ago. And whenever I do that, he's got his breath. He's ready to go again. He feels that rope tighten up once more. He's closer to the post than he was. He'll jerk back, rant, rave, pull, fight, kick, do everything he wants to. Hey, but he can't get loose from that post. The rope tightens up again, I got him. All I have to do is just stand there and wait. And sure enough, in a little bit, eyes start to bug out again. He'll start to breathe harden. Need to get some breath. He'll take 2 or 3 steps closer to the post. I'll pull in the slack again. The whole thing will start all over. You say, preacher, how long does it take you sometimes to get a horse up to the snubbing post? Because what you want to do is you want to keep pulling that rope until you get the horse's neck right up next to the post. I'm going to tie his neck right up to that post. You know why? That way, whenever I go to put the saddle on him, the blanket and the saddle, and get him used to it, whenever I do that, I want to make dead sure that that horse cannot get away, that that horse cannot buck, but just a very little bit. Because when you got your neck tied up to a tree, you can't do a whole lot of running around, see. And I've got him. By the way, do you know how a horse feels? He don't feel with his fingers like you and I do. He don't have fingers. I don't know if you thought that was gloves on the end of his feet down there, but that's not gloves. Those are hooves. He don't have fingers. Have you ever wondered how a horse feels things? Don't tell anybody, but a horse really does have a finger. He's only got one, and it's a big one. You know what it is? It's his upper lip. That's what it is. You ever see a horse sticking around? He's trying to feel it. He wants to feel it. It's like you putting out your hand and doing your fingers like that. Horse wanting to feel something. If there's something strange you want to get the horse used to, you take it, like the blanket. I mean, there's never been anything on the back of this horse. He's scared of everything. So I take the blanket, and I go up to him, and I hold it out to him, and he'll sniff it. His nostrils will flare back and forth like that. And he'll get wide-eyed and look at that thing, wonder what that horrible thing is that I'm holding out in front of him. And I hold it out there. It smells kind of strange to him. And he'll stick his nose down on there and sniff that thing, and he'll run his lip all over it and begin to feel it. He's not trying to bite me. He's feeling it. He's feeling it. When you give a horse a piece of apple or sugar or something out of your hand, he reaches for it with his finger, his lip. He's not trying to bite you. He's just trying to get a hold of it. That's all it is. Wants to know what it is and be able to get it. All right. I rub that blanket after let him run it all over with his lip, and then I'll rub it all over his face, rub it all over his ears, and I'll cover his head up with it and everything. I want him to know the blanket can't hurt him, no matter how frightening it may be. Run it down his neck and finally put it all over his back and then leave it there. Finally got the blanket on. I'll do the same thing with the saddle. I'll let him run his lip all over the saddle. Now, that's a little hard, because the saddle's not like a blanket. It's heavy, and it's awkward. And so you stand there and you hold it, and you keep letting him run his lip through it, and what have you, and finally you rub it up against his face and up against his neck, and rub that saddle and jingle it, and make it sound, and make the belt buckles clink and everything. Do everything you can, get him used to the sound, used to the idea, the feel of it. And then you throw it on his back, and try to hold on to it with one hand and keep one hand out here, so if the horse dances around, sticks his rump around her and tries to come around, he's liable to step on you. He won't kick you, but he might step on you. So you keep your hand out there. That way, if he comes toward you, when your rump comes close to you, it'll hit your hand, and it'll automatically just keep your arm stiff. It'll automatically just shove you back so you don't get stepped on. Say, how long does it take to do that, to get a saddle on a horse? Rope around his neck and put him in a snubbing post. Sometimes it might take as much as 8 hours. Sometimes you can do it in an hour. It just depends on the horse. There are sometimes you can't even get the saddle on the first day. It may take 2 or 3 days to get the saddle on his back. Hey, and it may take you 2 weeks, 3 weeks to a month, maybe 6 weeks to get a horse broken. But here's the point I want to make. Young people, listen to me. Do you know when I broke that horse? You say, yeah, 4 to 6 weeks. No. That horse didn't know it. But the minute I threw that rope around his neck, I had him broke. All I have to do is get one rope around a horse's neck, and I've got him. It may take me a while, and he may dance around there at the long end of the rope, long way from the snubbing post. And he can run all up and down that corral. But I'll guarantee you, as soon as I get a rope around a horse's neck, he's as good as broken. It may take me days and it may take me weeks to finish the job, but I've got him. And young people, you listen to me. All Satan has to do is throw one rope around your neck. And throwing one rope around your neck, he's got you. You say, not me, man. I'm foot loose and fancy free. Ain't nobody caught me. I've been sneaking around and breaking all kinds of rules. Mom and Daddy don't know what I'm doing, and the preacher don't know what I'm doing. Most of my friends don't know some of the things I do secretly. And brother, I'm getting away with sin. No, you're not. You just running at the end of the rope, but you already caught. And the devil is going to pull you a little bit, and he's very patient. He's going to pull you a little bit every day closer to that snubbing post. Watch it. Hey, now whenever we pull a horse to a snubbing post, our purpose is to help the horse and make the horse better, make the horse usable, a benefit. But when Satan throws a rope of sin around somebody's neck, his purpose is not to help. His purpose is to eventually kill you. He's going to get you up to the snubbing post and he's going to blow your brains out. He's going to cut your throat. And if he can't kill you, he'll dead sure settle for breaking your leg or ruining your life. He'll mess you up for good. Young people, hey, sin will destroy you. You get the rope of cigarette smoking around your neck, and I'll guarantee you one day it'll kill you. You play with the rope of drinking, and you'll regret the day you ever took a taste, because the day will come when you will be ruined for life. It'll mess you up. If it doesn't kill you, it'll mess you up for good. Drugs, a rope of sin. Sex, immorality, dirty books, filthy, dirty movies, dirty pictures. God help you, those things will destroy you. They're out to kill you. Don't you dare ever let one of those things get a hold of you. You let the devil get one of those ropes around your neck, or any other rope, the rope of lying, the rope of stealing. Brother, you'll find out that you'll have to do more. You'll have to go further into sin. You'll have to tell more lies. You'll end up stealing bigger things. There's never been a person yet ended up in the penitentiary that didn't start out stealing little things. It all starts small. Sin always starts small. No big deal with a rope thrown around your neck. That is, until later when you're up tight to the post and you get your throat cut. That's what Satan's working for. A man is held with the cords or the ropes of his own sin. Play with sin? You may think you're getting away with it. No, you just haven't reached the snubbing post yet. And Satan will get you there so he can destroy you one day. You say, preacher, what can I do? I'm already in sin. Satan's already got a rope. He may have 2 or 3 ropes around your neck. What can I do? I close with this idea. Your only hope was the only hope that Ebony had one night. I took Ebony from the pasture where we keep her boarded and rode her, I guess, 4 or 5 miles from there up to the house one day. Had her waiting whenever my family got home from school, when Deborah and David Michael got home from school. I'd promised I'd have Ebony there at the house, and they could ride her, and they could get all the neighborhood kids, and they could take them riding. And we had a big time. Enjoyed it. And everybody came. I mean, they came from blocks around to see Ebony. Big, beautiful black Morgan mare. And they rode and had the biggest time. And started getting dark. Betty said, she said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to head on back. She said, look, why don't we keep her here? We had a nice long rope, plenty of grass for her to graze in there in the yard. And I said, oh, I don't know why not. I think it'd be all right. So we got to talk about it, decide why not. So I told the boys, I said, we're going to keep Ebony overnight. And man, that was a big deal. I said, we're going to spend the night with Ebony. We're going to sleep outside. And it was a beautiful, warm spring night. And that was exciting. And so they'd hold the rope and let Ebony graze, and we'd brushed her down real good and combed her. She was shiny black. Had a good time. Now she's grazing in the grass of the yard, and we have about an acre of land altogether. Everything was fine. It came time to go to bed. We tied the rope around a tree so she could graze, because a horse will sleep off and on. They don't sleep all night, wake up, and then eat the next day. They sleep for a little while, wake up, eat some, go to sleep again, and so forth. And horses don't lay down when they go to sleep. They sleep standing up. They just lock their knees in place, and they just stand there and sleep. And so we tied the rope around a tree there in the yard so she could graze all she wanted to, and that way if she woke up and wanted to eat some and graze during the night, she could only go so far because the rope was there. So we talked and giggled and had a big time with the boys, and we slept out on the deck there at the house, on the big deck we have on the back part of the house. And finally we all fell asleep. About 3 o'clock in the morning, I heard this horrible, horrible sound. Sounded like 3 or 4 boys were wrestling on the ground. I mean, just having a big fight, except nobody was saying anything. And I thought David and Michael have gotten up and are playing. And I looked up, and David and Michael were still asleep in their sleeping bags there on the deck. And I thought, well, I dreamed it. And I listened, didn't hear anything, so I laid back down. In a few minutes, I heard it again. Just like a big wrestling match going on out in the yard. And I looked up again. I wasn't quite all the way to sleep, and I looked up, and David and Michael's still there in their bedroom. And I thought, well, what in this world? And I got up, and I looked out in the yard, and the moon was shining bright. And lo and behold, Ebony was laying on the ground, and she had gotten her horseshoes, her 2 rear horseshoes, tied up in the rope. She had stepped on it and gotten tangled up in it, and the rope had slipped under the horseshoe between her hoof and the shoe. And it was in there tight, and the hard thing was that it had tripped her, and she had fallen to the ground, and she was trying to get loose, and in the process she had somehow or another tightened that rope up so that even though there was not a noose, we'd made a knot so that it couldn't slip. But even though there wasn't, she had somehow or another got her head around the thing and looped it 2 different times, and she was choking herself to death. Every time she'd try to get free, she'd kick her feet and it'd tighten up around her neck. And I've been around horses enough to know that it was serious. And I jumped off the deck. I didn't go down the steps. I jumped over the edge of that deck and hit the ground and ran out there. And I hollered for David. I said, "Get Mama!" And I ran over the side of Ebony to make sure I stayed away from her feet because she was kicking, trying to get loose. And I could see her eyes. Her eyes were bugged. Her tongue was already hanging out the side of her mouth. And brother, when it's like that, a horse is almost gone. And Betty, she came running out the door. She said, "What's the matter?" I said, "Ebony's dying." I said, "Give me a knife." She said, "I don't have one." I said, "Go get it." I tried to get the rope free, tried to jerk it, but brother, it was caught between her shoe and her hoof, and there was no getting it out. And then I remembered that I hadn't emptied my pockets that night. I was sleeping in my clothes there in the dampness of the night. And I reached in my pocket, and sure enough, I had one little bitty pocket knife. And I jerked that thing out of the little scabbard I had it in and reached down, and I pulled that thing out and dropped it and reached around in the grass and trying to find it, and Ebony's just a-screaming, breathing hard, trying to get a breath. And I fumbled around the grass and found that thing and finally pulled it up and opened that knife up, and I reached down and I grabbed that whole rope, beautiful rope, brand new rope, spent $30 on the dumb thing. And I grabbed a hold of that rope and I stuck that knife to it and I cut and I sawed just as quick as I could. And the knife had just been sharpened. And if it hadn't been for that, I don't think she'd have lived. But I cut that, and finally the rope snapped and her feet flung straight out like that. And her head snapped back. And her chest heaved and she began to breathe heavily. I literally saved Ebony's neck. I saved her life. The only way I did it was I cut the rope. Do you know what? The only way you can keep being destroyed by sin is to cry out to God and ask Him to cut the ropes of sin. Repent of it. Ask Him to have mercy on you and save you if you're not saved. If you are saved, ask Him, as you repent of it, ask Him to forgive you for playing with it, and ask Him to cut it. And He'll keep you from being destroyed. Only God can do it. Ebony couldn't get free herself. Somebody else had to do it. You can't get free from the ropes of sin. Only God can cut Satan's ropes that are wrapped around your neck. God help you. Don't play with sin. Ebony didn't die, but Ebony limped for almost 2 months because the ropes had burned away the skin and cut clear to the bone on her 2 hind legs. Nobody could touch her for 2 months. Nobody could get near her except to spray on the blue lotion, the medicine. We thought we might lose her to infection, but she lived through that. But she limped for a long time. She's all right now, but sin will always leave its mark on you, and to this day I can see where the rope burns had cut deep into her flesh. Young people, hate sin. Be afraid of it. Stay away from it. Bow your head and close your eyes.